So I don't have my grip panels on, but I do have DocFire's new piston upgrade in here, and that's the only thing I've changed. I did a lot of work to get this working under the normal piston system from Nummech. This was a simple drop in. I upped the pressure for 15 seconds to chronograph, and this thing is super consistent now. .311, 313, 311. Where is it? 311, 298, 297, 293, 312. Plus minus 10 is the best I can seem to get out of this paint, and as you can see, I just had a rollout, so my paint to barrel match isn't perfect either. But it just rips now. I'm super happy. DocFire piston upgrade for Nummech frames. Definitely look into it. Welcome, Cocker fans, to another episode of Canadian Custom Cockers. I'm Charles Bird, your host for this episode, which has to do with DocFire's reg piston fix for these Nummech frames specifically. Now, I was privileged enough to grab one of the very first ones of these because I knew they were coming. This is how they come. I got two, one for a customer build. I'll be installing this one in his next. Very nice laser engraving on the piston itself, telling the orientation of the washers when you put it in there, also naming what it is and naming what O-rings you need on it. And I got the version 1.1. I'm sure 1.0 was his test version. Comes with a little bit of an instruction manual. I have to do a more in-depth analysis of this product. What you guys just saw was an initial impressions. I literally got this thing out of the package. I took my ASA off, took the red reg seat housing area out, put this piston in replacement of the stock piston, and put it all back together. That's literally all I did. It took me about 2.5 minutes. It's a drop-in replacement. I can't for the life of me remember where I put the original one. That's really dumb. So I stopped filming for a second to look for the dang thing, and I honestly have no clue where it is. She gone. It don't matter anyway. I'm never installing it back in this gun regardless, because this thing is the boss hoss. As mentioned previously, that video that you just saw was a first impressions. I literally installed it, aired the gun up, and took it outside, and a minute later I was filming what you saw. I just slowly increased the pressure on the rag until I got 300 feet per second out of this gun-ish, barring my paint quality, and you saw everything. This was a 5-minute upgrade, and let me tell you what I've already noticed is that the problem that this thing has where you have to really gas it up stupidly slow, otherwise you jam the air into the piston and the piston goes all cattywampus sideways and frigs up the spring that they include there. That's eliminated. These Belleville washers do a way better job of making sure it stays concentrically aligned in there. And what's cool is Doc even includes an extra reg seat for that piston to smash into, because the reg seat housing, the red thing that's in here, is the way it's designed is it puts a lot of torsional rotation on the reg seat while you're adjusting it. So it seems to wear, it's a design that wears the reg seat out faster than most other designs. So that's a pretty slick thing that he does for you when you purchase this thing, is he gets you another reg seat. Now, that helps with the gassing up issue. So your piston is going to concentrically align with that reg seat every time and not allow the springs to get it off center. These Belleville washers keep it centered for you. So I've noticed that was a huge difference and a huge upgrade. The next thing that I noticed is, despite the extensive amount of work I did with other techs helping me along the way, polishing the stem of that brass piston before and reshaping the sealing surface to make sure it really bites into that reg seat. Despite all the little tricks that I did, they did help, but the recharge on this thing was horrendous. You would get 3 balls at like 298, and anything past that in a stream would be about 260, which, I mean, comes in handy once in a while if you want to do a lob shot, but I would rather get the ball all the way across the field. And this thing, after I put the camera away, I started throwing some streams, and it's very consistent. It shoots down maybe 5 feet per second on average. Like I said, my paint's not the greatest right now for like a perfect review, but the shoot down on this thing is drastically changed for the better. So that's number 2 that I've noticed. And I have kept everything else stock about this build. I haven't changed any of the lower tube. So right now I have a CCM 11/16 valve in here. When I first built it, it happened to be the only 11/16 valve I had. I think it's a resurrection hammer because it has the right slot length, and maybe a free flow hammer spring. It's working well. It used to work decent. It was shootable, but now with this piston upgrade, it actually shoots really well. So the other thing I did is off camera, and I'm going to do this again on camera, is I took this grip panel off and I put my gauge on that to see what the pressure is at. And it's sitting right around 325 PSI, right around where, CCM valves like to operate at. The notorious thing about these frames is they work at 2 pressures. They work, 3 pressures. They work somewhere around 0, and then they get to 275 to 325, and if you go any more, it shoots to 700. There's no middle ground. So when you got this thing, you set it to 300-ish, wherever you can get it in the ish category, and then you sprung your lower tube and changed your valve to suit and just dealt with it. I don't think that's necessary anymore, because when I put my much more lower valued gauge on here earlier, and I'm going to replicate this result on the camera for y'all. I got a much lower regulator reading from this piston upgrade. And I think I could go even lower if I change, the springs to a different orientation. So I'm going to experiment with that. What this really brings me to my next point. Being that they don't really work below 275 PSI, I didn't see any intrinsic benefits to installing a different valve in here. But now that this regulator might actually work around the 200 PSI mark, I can start contemplating putting the pieces that I really want in here. So here I have the vulnerable Lazarus valve and a Jenny Craig hammer and another Delrin style hammer. We'll see which one works. Angry included the very important valve retention screw because they're weirdly shaped. Thank you, Jason. And DocFire was letting me know that these Lazarus valves and this regulator specifically really benefits from having a low pressure chamber. And I just happen to have a ShockTech low pressure chamber that would match the front. Nice. So I'm about to possibly ruin my weekend because this thing's shooting really good and I could shoot it this weekend. But for the sake of Autococker testing, let's install all these parts and see what happens. I'll be right back. Had to do a little bit of filing on the ShockTech volumizer to allow it to fit in the front block. This is a fairly typical problem and solution for these WGP spec front blocks. Normally it doesn't fit. Wow, I can't do this one-handed. Normally it doesn't fit in there until you do a little bit of filing. So the cool thing about this is you can just chuck it up in a drill in that hex piece and get a wide enough file where you touch both those surfaces at the same time and spin it. I also widened a couple of these transfer holes. You can see that this one's smaller, this one's bigger. I'm going to do it to all four just to make it flow a little better. So I'm installing the Lazarus, and I have chamfered the inside of that sealing lip like Angry Paintball has suggested. I've also taken the U-cup O-ring out and I'm replacing it with a 009. Also installing with the ATTKTX Lazarus Valve screw. Has this O-ring to kind of squanch it in there nice and secure without getting too tight. Something else to remind you guys is these Nummech bodies come with a recess in the threads, so it's quick thread already. So if you get a quick thread barrel, they're not usually compatible. 2 quick threads equals no threads. So something that really works with these bodies are these Scony Epsilon barrels, whether it's the Nova insert variant or this PWR variant. It actually has enough threads to engage and, you know, be somewhat sturdy. It has at least 2 full threads of engagement before it bottoms out, which is very rare and hard to find with these particular bodies. So here we are. We got the Lazarus in. It's not leaking. It took 2 or 3 attempts with the front block also leaking, but I've got it all figured out. HPR is working how it should, thanks to Doc. The Lazarus is working how it should, thanks to Jason. And the volumizer is no longer leaking in between the front block and the body due to some O-ring changes. It's good to go. Looks pretty good with the ShockTech pneumatics. It, you know, belongs there. And a key though with the Lazarus valve is you can use a Jenny Craig hammer from Angry Paintball. And this is when this setup really comes alive, because it requires such light springing with a light hammer that it really brings into play a rounded hammer lug. I'm not usually a fan of rounded hammer lugs, but in this particular setup with an AutocockerParts.com roller sear, the trigger pull is absolutely heavenly. So here I am with the Nummech gun, obviously with a DocFire Piston upgrade. I put the Angry modded Lazarus in here and put on my rusty, trusty Scony Epsilon barrel with the PWR inserts. Best barrel for the money out there, bar none, if you ask me. This thing's shooting really consistent now. I have way better paint than you saw me with the initial impressions. And it's obviously working in that about 200 PSI pressure window for the Lazarus valve to work in, because these HPRs never used to work without that DocFire piston upgrade that low. So here we go. 283, 277, 285. I short stroked, good now. But yeah, this thing is working money, and I've never shot a Lazarus valve that worked properly before, let alone in a system that doesn't like to work at 200 PSI. I am beyond happy with this gun. Check it out, DocFire piston upgrade.